Cantwell, radical agenda himself.
Hey there, my name's Chris Cantwell. Maybe you heard of me. I do a little show called Radical Agenda every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I'm kind of pissed off at these alt-light cucks, I gotta tell you. Because I actually went to bat for them the other day, if you can believe that. You know, they disrupted that play where they depicted the assassination of Donald Trump. And some people were like, what are you doing? He acted like, protesting like a leftist. What are you doing? And, you know, I think that's, you don't typically see a great deal of right-wing activism. So I'm kind of like glad to see this because I've recently become convinced that that's a more important thing than I think a lot of us realize. Now, I wrote a little thing about this disruption that they had, but I'm just going to read a segment of it because it applies to exactly what we're doing here, too. Predictably, leftists condemn the act, though not due to it failing to meet their high standards of civil discourse. They do this kind of thing, and far worse, all the time. They oppose it because they see the assassination of Trump or the genocide of white people as a noble goal quite worthy of artistic promotion. Suggesting the depiction was indecent is ridiculous to them, and they would rather see that disruption take place at something they see as truly evil, like a church that won't perform gay marriages. Just as predictably, the right largely attack their own people over it as well. Not because they condone the violence depicted per se, but because it seems to be beneath the dignity of a conservative to make a nuisance of oneself on someone else's property, even if that someone else is the enemy. We tend to think the way to pursue political and social change is through discussion and debate. We prefer to win on the merits of our ideas and view leftist riots and revolutions as downright uncivilized behavior. The problem the honest conservative then faces, however, is that arguments, facts, decency, and righteousness mean nothing to our leftist rivals. If we were going to win on the merits of our ideas, there would be no such thing as a right wing, because everyone would be a right-winger due to the mere righteousness of our cause. Merit is meaningless to a communist, and so winning on the merits in a showdown with one is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. They will disrupt your play, they will riot in your streets, they will set fire to your buildings, and shovel countless innocent bodies into mass graves, all to avoid facing meritocratic competition. Violence and deception are his only weapons, and he uses them like a conservative uses books. So what conservative would adopt the tactics of a filthy communist? A conservative who is sick and tired of losing his country to people who have no standards and realizes that there will be no such thing as righteousness if he does not prevail in a conflict. So long as we render ourselves defenseless by adhering to the rules of civil discourse in a conflict with people who operate by the rules of warfare and espionage, we will lose 100% of the time. So long as we prefer to punch right and counter and virtue signal, rather, or rather than coordinating to destroy our enemies, it is our enemies who will coordinate to destroy us. Sure, leftists protest like savages, and sure, that's despicable. Sure, leftists lie to gain political power, and sure, this makes them criminals of the worst sort. Sure, leftists riot, murder, and start revolutions, and sure, we prefer peace. You know what else leftists do? They win. At all costs and without regard for rules, morality, or dignity, they get what they want, and they get it at our expense. So at what point does the right accept that we are in some way compelled to be defined by our enemies? At what point do we realize that peace and meritocratic competition are no longer on our list of options? At what point do we begin physically removing Democrats and communists to establish and maintain the libertarian social order necessary for our desired meritocracy? If the answer is not now, then we might as well throw in the towel and forfeit to the communists today. We are losing massive ground each moment. Non-white immigration and breeding alone are rapidly diminishing what electoral majorities we have remaining. Jewish influence disarms us in the left's onslaught of identity politics. Our universities teach little more than the propaganda of our enemies to our children, and we are compelled to subsidize it all with our own earnings under penalty of imprisonment and death for refusal. Disrupting a play is the most civil thing that we should do to these vermin. During episode 318 of the Radical Agenda, I discussed a piece in Jacobite magazine titled "Political Violence is a Game the Right Can't Win." In it, David Hines explains that despite the American right's affinity for firearms and deep respect for soldiers and lawmen, we are no safe to fight the communists. The reason, he says, is that we lack the camaraderie and networking of our leftist counterparts. That networking and camaraderie is built up through activism. The unemployed losers we mock in between our productive efforts are not just screaming into the ether for no reason. They are building teams, figuring out who the leaders are, sizing up strengths and weaknesses, acquiring resources, and honing their propaganda to become efficient mechanisms of radicalization. Put simply, they are preparing for open warfare while we prepare for structured competitions like debates and marksmanship. Either that changes, or not only will we lose, we will be scrubbed from the historical record. Inside of a generation, it will be as though we never existed, other than as some false historical narrative like Hitler's Germany. Pick one, or the communists will make the decision on your behalf.